Okay. Hello, my name is Raymond Romanos, and my presentation is on house diving. I came across the term back in 1996 when I first moved to Leipzig, Germany. The idea comes from dumpster diving, where people go through dumpsters to recover things. So back in 1996, I decided, well, when I moved to Germany, there were so many abandoned buildings. My friends told me if I needed anything, all I needed to do was to go through these buildings. And that's where I came up with this term. So in these buildings, I would find everything from coal to bicycles to cars, everything you can imagine. The reason why there were so many abandoned buildings in East Germany was that in 1989, after the wall fell, many people went to the west. They left everything behind. So in East Germany, they lost about 300,000 people in that 1 year. And over the course of 10 years, they lost around 1 million people. In Leipzig, the city had about 45,000 abandoned buildings. In all of Germany, all of East Germany, about 1 million abandoned or empty apartments existed in that area. Why were they empty? Well, most of the time there was a dispute over who owned the buildings. After the fall of the socialist government, they had to find who owned the buildings. During the socialist era, they had basically taken over the buildings for themselves. And so they had to find the owners. Typically, the original owners had died, and they had to divide up the property amongst the kids, and sometimes, or the relatives, and sometimes they had a problem with what they wanted to do with the property. If the ownership couldn't be cleared, then the property was taken up by a state-run agency, which, because it was expensive to renovate these buildings, they left them to decay. And in these socialist housing blocks, a lot of the times they had a lot of debt carried over from the East German times, which they could not pay off, so it was impossible to renovate them. So it was easier to let them fall apart because the debt was erased. I'll talk to you about the legality of these things. The reason why it's the gray zone of legalness is you can squat in Germany, but you can't break it into a house. But if the things are abandoned, if anything's abandoned, it's yours for the taking. So a house diver has to walk a very fine line between legal and illegal. So most likely we're trying our very best not to get caught. The best way not to get caught is not to be stupid. Use your common sense and don't just, make a lot of noise when you enter into a building. Make sure no one's looking at you. Don't use flashlights if it's dark in a window, and don't use flash photography. When you go through these abandoned buildings, you have to be careful what you wear, and make sure you always bring a flashlight and tools with you. Otherwise, you may find yourself wanting something and unable to screw it, or maybe if you want to go and visit the basements, you can't see because it's too dark. Why we do it? Well, we get a rush out of it. And if I look at it in the terms of a psychological sense, or psychoanalytical, like when you go through a building, you go deeper into your own psyche and discover more about yourself, as well as about the culture in which this house was created. So you find out a lot about these people in this house. There's also a very special atmosphere. When you come in off the street, the sounds of the street fade away. You're in this time warp, and this new zone, this new world, and it's just completely fascinating. What people leave behind is just amazing. They'll leave their most personal possessions, their photos, their teddy bears, everything. Anything they didn't need, or didn't place any more value on, they left behind. People will specialize, the house divers. They'll specialize in finding lamps. They'll specialize in coal ovens. They'll specialize in dishes and bicycles, and in World War II memorabilia, or even in East German memorabilia. I've come across some very interesting things in my day while I was a house diver. Among cars, there was a photo, as you saw, of a car that was carried up onto the second floor. Someone had actually carried a car up the stairs and placed it in the middle of a building. That I found was interesting. When you go house diving, you have to be very careful because it's been 20 years since the wall has fallen. The roofs have become broken and are leaking, and that the risk of collapse or you falling to the floor is very big, so you have to be careful and use your common sense. If the ceiling looks rotted and falling down, don't go into that part of the room. There are other parts of the house which are safer. Most safest place, of course, is the basement. There are many things you can do with these abandoned buildings outside of letting them rot. You can actually, like a lot of photographers, go into these buildings to take pictures. You can do art projects. Here you see a picture of a woman dancing. It's very, very interesting what you can do with these buildings. I have friends, they show movies in these abandoned buildings. They do tango in these buildings. Yes. So, house diving is not contained just to East Germany. Anywhere where there's a large migration of people, Detroit, for example, New Orleans nowadays. Here's a picture of the Dixie Brewery. This was actually before Katrina, and I actually had a tour by the brewmeister shortly before the brewery was abandoned. There has been an attempt in Leipzig and around in East Germany to try to recover these abandoned buildings and to make use legally out of them, and people have taken them over, and it's called the House Project, or the Watchers. They keep an eye on the house, they make sure that it doesn't fall down,